Looking back at the early 2000s, there's some universal things we all did even before the internet. We all knew how to draw that S. You know the S I'm talking about. We all knew about Tamagotchis for some reason. The rainbow fish. All that. Neopets. But there's one thing that stood above all of those I just mentioned. And that's gotta be the Kamehameha. Who didn't know a kid that went out to their front yard, made the pose, said the words, and pretended like a beam was coming out of his hands? That's how important and inspirational Goku is. Like, he is an icon. And let's be honest here, who hasn't tried to go Super Saiyan at least once? If you say you haven't, I don't believe you. In a unique way, Dragon Ball Z was the face of the early 2000s for a lot of people. From the show, from the card games, from the books, from the toys, everything around the early 2000s for people around my age was kind of Goku, and the games were no different. For a lot of people, the Legacy of Goku games are like those early sketches of your favorite anime characters. Rough, awkward, and it looked like you drew them if you learned how to draw from one of those how to draw manga books you got from your library. If any of y'all remember those books, they were so bad, like, yeesh, not great. All that to say, those games were undeniably full of heart. But what if I told you those 3 humble GBA games planted the seeds for one of the most ambitious Dragon Ball Z games ever? That's right, the game where one of the core grinding mechanics were to beat up animals set the foundation for a game like Dragon Ball Z Kakarot to be made. A modern action RPG that lets you relive the series in all its over-the-top glory. So much over-the-top glory. Goodness, that game looks pretty. So stick around, because we're not just diving into nostalgia. We're unpacking how some of the most unique design choices of the early 2000s evolved into something epic. And along the way, we might hit some shocking truths, like who really made the music behind DBZ. But more on that later. So, I'm Remy, and I just want to ask, has anyone checked on the Legacy of Goku games? And if not, let's. In the early 2000s, Dragon Ball Z was everywhere. The anime was a cultural juggernaut, but the video games? Kind of a mixed bag. You got the console games with a bunch of bangers like Budokai Tenkaichi 1, 2, 3, and 4, Raging Blast, and all the other super amazing console games. But when it came to the handheld games, it was either a hit or a miss. You could get an amazing game like Dragon Ball Z Super Saiyan Warriors. Also, side note, this game was made by Arc System Works, so if you don't know, they only develop the best anime fighting games, and all their games look amazing. So if you ever wondered why it looks so good on the Game Boy Advance, it's because they developed it, just so you know. Want to put y'all on game. On the other side of the table though, you could get a bad game like Dragon Ball Z Taiketsu. And if y'all don't remember this game, or it's the first time you're hearing about this game, and how bad this game is/was, let me show you something. Look at this hot mess they sold to people. To me, I wasted money on this. I'm never gonna get over that. And to be honest, I mostly blame the GameStop employee for hyping this game up. He made it sound like it was God's gift to Dragon Ball Z fans for the GBA. And I ate that up like a fool. Like, I was a child, man. Don't lie to me, please. With this hot or cold approach to video games, a person might end up wondering if they even like Dragon Ball Z. And when all hope was lost, enters Webfoot Technologies. Hey, post-editing/recording Remy here. Just want to get ahead of this before I see 1,000 comments or whatever number of comments about this. I know Webfoot made Taiketsu, so I'm already knowing it's not great, but like for this part, I really gassed them up. So I wanted to just like, hey, I know they're not perfect, so okay, back to the script now. Bye! A small American studio tasked with translating one of the most beloved anime franchises into a Game Boy Advance game. Their plan? An action RPG that would cover the Saiyan saga. Their reality? Limited resources, tight deadlines, and absolutely no experience with RPGs. So if we're being completely honest, the first Legacy of Goku game, you know, it just wasn't the best, so to speak, you know? But hold on now though, just because it wasn't the best doesn't mean it was bad. It just means we have a lot to talk about. So let's just get this out of the way. The first Legacy of Goku game is weird, just point blank. Instead of fighting, you know, iconic DBZ villains or just kind of minor characters, you're, you know, fighting crabs, snakes, and wolves. So many strong wolves. Sweet Jesus, I think I have pixelated wolf PTSD. Oh my gosh. Like the devs thought, what if Goku's real enemy wasn't Frieza, but wildlife? Combat was clunky, and using energy blasts kind of felt like throwing a wet rag at something. Like it did something, but never enough. And the leveling system? Ugh. Let's just say it was less grind and more punishment. Because the first time you open up the game, you go to the forest to grind some levels and you see some wolves and you're like, oh, clearly wolves are just fodder enemies. I'm Goku. Easy. Little did you know, these wolves are trying to end the Sun bloodline. No Goten for anybody. They wanted to end it all for this man. It was ridiculous. Despite all those cons, people loved it anyway. Why? Because it was Dragon Ball, let's be honest here. And for a lot of kids, this was probably their first taste at an actual RPG. Thankfully though, later in the game's trilogy, the devs would refine these mechanics, adding smoother options for grinding and fighting. And it became easier to kill the wolves. Like, I can't, unless you have played this game, you don't understand how much I hate those wolves from the first game. Like, if I'm being completely honest, it's kind of on sight levels of hatred. Like, you done spit on my mama or something. Like, I hate those things. I hate those wolves so much. And thankfully, it wasn't just me. Murray Craft, a member of the dev team of Webfoot, said in an interview once, "We think that the biggest surprise we got out of the Legacy of Goku was a response to the wolves, or the blue dogs, as we affectionately call them in the office." He continues by saying, "Many people now have a special dark place in their heart for the blue dog." So they knew the wolves were on demon time, and they just didn't tell anybody till after the fact. All that to say, even the devs knew the wolves were too much. And thankfully, by the time we got to Legacy of Goku 2 and Boo's Fury, you didn't have to worry about the wolves anymore. Because of drastically improved mechanics, Legacy of Goku 2 introduced multiple playable characters, which is amazing, smoother combat, and a more balanced leveling system. While Boo's Fury took even further with equipable items, stat customization, and tighter combat that made grinding less of a chore and more of a rewarding experience. Together, these sequels show how much the developers learned and grew from their first outing. Granted, Webfoot wasn't exactly a AAA developer studio or anything in that nature. They were scrappy, and they had to be. Developing a game based on a global franchise with a shoestring budget, that's a tall order. But then Atari, the publisher, pushed them even harder. Make it bigger, convey more of the story arcs, and yeah, don't delay the release. And somehow they pulled it off. Each game felt more ambitious, more realistic, like relatively, and more stylized than the last one. All this leading up to their magnum opus, Boo's Fury. They were evidence of Webfoot's determination to improve in each iteration. So let's talk sprites, right? The first game sprites, honestly, serviceable. Not the best, but they got the job done. You could tell who Goku was because Goku looked like Goku, but the backgrounds, kinda MS Painty, if that makes sense. Like a little bit too much in that regard. And by the time the third game had come around, the art team had found their groove. They were locked in. The sprite work became more detailed. The animations a lot smoother, and the environments felt alive. It was incredible. It wasn't just a step up, it was honestly a leap. Therefore, the trilogy's art style went from fan project to legitimately impressive. And to go a bit more on the original artwork, Legacy of Goku 2 marked a significant improvement with more dynamic environments and character sprites that resembled the actual anime counterparts. And Boo's Fury, they pushed these even further, adding a vibrant color palette and more expressive character animations. This elevated the overall experience. It wasn't just a step up, man. They were flying, actually. You could say it was more like overnight. I'm not gonna do that. I'm gonna make that joke eventually, but not right now. You have been warned. And another factor that elevated the overall experience has to be the music. So here's a fun fact. The music from the first Legacy of Goku game wasn't even from the anime. It was composed by Ariel Gross, who is a very talented composer who's done a lot of amazing work. But honestly, this didn't exactly scream Dragon Ball. So the studio did what the studio does best and improved the audio in the next two games. So by the time Legacy of Goku 2 and Boo's Fury had come out, they had gotten the Falconer score. And man, that score is so iconic to Dragon Ball Z, it's ridiculous. Okay, me hyping up the soundtrack aside, we gotta talk about the awkward situation whenever you bring up the Falconer score in Dragon Ball Z now. So there's two stories when it comes to who actually made the Falconer score, quote unquote. You have Falconer himself saying he did everything, yada yada yada, this is all my work, that's why my name's on it. And on the other side, you have the real composers who were Mike Smith, Julius Dobos, and Scott Morgan. And if we're being completely honest, I believe their side's way more credible, but it's up to you to who you want to believe. Falconer to this day claims he still made the soundtrack, even though his old co-workers and other people on the soundtrack said he didn't really do much. Well, it's not my job to find out, so I'll leave that to any internet detectives who want to take up that challenge and find out who actually composed it. Regardless though, suddenly the games felt like Dragon Ball with this new music. And in a way, the music became a character within itself, hyping you up for battles and tugging at your heartstring during an emotional moment, regardless of whoever actually made it. Whoever did deserves flowers, whether it be the trio or even Falconer. Their work on the Funimation dub defined how Dragon Ball Z sounded for an entire generation. So when these tracks were adapted for the video games, it elevated the games from just okay to nostalgic gold. That high energy electric guitar during the boss fight, instant chills. It wasn't just background music, it was an adrenaline shot. And if you thought I was done talking about how visually impressive this game had gotten, you was wrong, because we're going back to the art now. The sprite artists behind the trilogy don't get nearly enough credit for all the work they did. They had to take Akira Toriyama, rest in peace, amazing artwork, and somehow translate that to a GBA screen. I know designers that can't even do minimalism, and the thought of trying to put Goku into a pixel art style and make it readable as Goku still is such an incredible feat to me personally. And by Boo's theory, they were honestly just flexing what they could do with the pixel art style. Mandy Paw did the character art, while the overall art and design were created by Jim Grant, Andrew Myers, and Gary Swanson. Each member of the team were pivotal for the overall feel the game had. It was a great showcase of the overall capability of the Game Boy Advance. And that goes to show, if you know what you're doing within your means, you can make amazing stuff. If you didn't know this, a lot of Nintendo hardware tends to be underpowered. It's such a common thing that persists even till today. Looking at you, the switch in my room that hasn't been turned on in a year is collecting dust. But one thing I'll never take away from Nintendo is Nintendo devs know how to optimize their game. Let's just ignore Scarlet and Violet. Good devs can make a game look amazing. For example, look at Breath of the Wild. You look at any of the two Breath of the Wild games and it just makes you wonder, are these devs cooking with magic back in Nintendo? Because how is this running on my Switch? There are mobile games that run better than my Switch nowadays, so I don't even understand how they got Breath of the Wild to work. It's magic, and Nintendo is great when they cook like they do. Goes to show you, when a good dev team locks in, they can make the impossible possible, which is amazing to see. For example, adapting a complex story. For example, condensing all of Dragon Ball Z into small saga bits on a Game Boy. Not easy. The first game struggled with it actually. Iconic moments felt rushed or skipped. But game 2 and 3, they nailed it, man. Scenes like Gohan going Super Saiyan 2 or Vegeta's sacrifice actually had weight. The writing team knew they had to follow the anime closely, but also had to know when to take creative liberties to not drag on the story. Okay, normally this is the part where I do the whole white screen, go over the entire franchise, story lore and stuff, but like, man, this is Dragon Ball Z, dog. If I had to explain the story behind DBZ, I feel like I'm insulting somebody at this point. It feels like explaining to someone that Uncle Ben died or Batman's parents are dead. At this point, you kind of just know how the story plays out. So instead of me going traditional beat by beat, I'm going to parody the mess out of this. And obviously, I'm not going to include anything with Beerus and Resurrection F because technically they're Dragon Ball Z. They obviously did not happen in the GBA games. Okay, so without further ado, story time. Dragon Ball Z is a story of an early to midlife Goku, a guy who's an overpowered alien whose predominant thought majority of the time is, I'ma fight it, or I'ma eat it. One of those two. Throughout the show, he dies a couple times, some light. And the reasons for those deaths tend to be related to what he does as an occupation. I mean, I guess he is technically a farmer, but his secondary job, his hobby, which is indirectly saving the earth, even though he sometimes causes the problems. But that's neither here nor there. He spends most of his adult life getting punched in the face by aliens, androids, and demons. And he got shot one time. That bothers me still, man. That's dumb. I know I wasn't gonna talk about Res F, but that still bothers me. Furthermore, all those people who want to punch him in the face tend to want to destroy the world. It's a pretty common thing in the DBZ universe. Okay, the start of the Saiyan saga. First, Goku fights his long-lost brother Raditz and dies. But no worries, he gets wished back to life by a magical dragon. It was basically Earth's 24/7 customer service call line when things kind of go sideways for the guys. Later on during the Saiyan saga, we eventually meet Vegeta, the ultimate brooding space prince of two people since Raditz is dead. Lost a villager there, buddy. There's also Nappa, but he doesn't last long, so, Prince of 2, again, technically, if you want to count Gohan to 1.5. After Nappa, goes to the chiropractor, Vegeta and Goku run the ones. Vegeta loses and then goes home. Next up, Frieza, the most extra villain ever, aka everybody's favorite racist space real estate agent.
Hello, monkey!
Love that guy. He makes Goku's best friend a piñata, the best human ever, my guy Krillin, which makes Goku so mad he becomes a Super Saiyan. A form that's basically just a crash out with spiky hair. He beats Frieza, goes home eventually, makes a stop along the way, learns how to teleport or whatever. After that, Cell shows up, a villain who's obsessed with tournaments and blowing up the earth for fun. Goku lets his son Gohan take over the final battle and surprise, he wins. Also, side note, he is not a teenager. He is like 11 when this happens. Every time people say Teen Gohan beats Cell, my skin kind of crawls. Like, that was an 11 to like a 10-year-old, bro. There wasn't even teen in the name. Anyway, just when you think the fight's over and everybody's gonna be happy about it, Gohan sells and becomes a bit cocky, and Goku dies because of it. So, Goku dead too. Eventually, Gohan locks in and just kind of, father-son Kamehameha saves the planet. Time passes and Gohan becomes an actual teenager and goes to high school. And then that's it. He does nothing else in high school. Nope, that's it. No Kamen Rider stuff. And then Majin Buu rolls up. He's a giant big marshmallow who's gonna destroy everything and everyone. But like, after 100 episodes, multiple power-ups, a new fusion, and Gohan becoming the strongest character again, to only Cell at the last moment, again, Goku finally wins by making a spirit ball and actually defeating somebody with it for the first time in the entire series. RIP my man Boo. Shout out my man Oob. So yeah, that's Dragon Ball Z. It's an epic battle, power-ups, and Goku getting punched a couple times. The moral of the story? Stall until Goku and Vegeta show up, then stall to when Vegeta loses for Goku to, save the day. Unless it's a Gohan movie, then Gohan's gonna lock in. But until then, it's mostly the Goku show. Okay, thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Don't get too mad at me, guys. Obviously, I couldn't cover every aspect of every saga. Like, obviously, I skipped the Future Trunks stuff because, just as much as I love Future Trunks and Future Gohan, I could have skipped them just for sake of time. I didn't want to be editing for like 60 plus hours. I love the Z Fighters. I love what they do, but editing a 60 plus hour video kind of scares me. Anyhow, speaking of things that got criticized, let's talk about how the first Legacy of Goku game did overall. And spoiler alert, it didn't exactly win any awards. Critics were not kind to the first game. They called it basic and unpolished. Me personally, I don't agree with Metacritic. I think the score should be actually lowered, based solely because of the wolves. But gamers, let's be honest here, DBZ fans, we didn't care. The game sold over 1 million copies in the US alone. And to be honest, that tracks for most DBZ fans, myself included. If you slap Goku on something, 10 times out of 10, I'm gonna try it bare minimum. Thankfully, each sequel built on that momentum of the first game. Legacy of Goku 2 got great scores, which it fully deserved, and to be honest, it's my favorite of all the Legacy games, with the third installment becoming a fan favorite. So despite all the criticism, the trilogy was a commercial success, and with that, the Legacy of Goku ended on a high note, which is something a lot of franchises don't get. So that was it. DBZ RPGs were done. Besides a few false flags and other RPGs, DBZ was done with the RPG space. Well, until 2020. Fast forward to 2020 and a lot of bad stuff was happening, man. A lot of bad stuff. But a good thing that happened in 2020, which is crazy to say. Dragon Ball Z Kakarot drops, and suddenly we're back into the world of action RPG and Dragon Ball. But this time, we got a budget. We got an open world game with cinematic cutscenes and a somewhat deep combat system. It felt like the logical evolution of what Legacy of Goku started. It was like the trilogy walk so Kakarot could go over 9,000. See? I told you I was gonna do the thing. What Legacy of Goku introduced as a simple form, Kakarot mastered. From leveling up, upgrading abilities, collecting items, all of these were improvement. But the biggest improvement was the scale, man. Never before had the DBZ world felt so accessible from a person. You could fly in the mountaintops, go to the wasteland, go to Capsule Corp, do all these nebulous things you never really wanted to do, but now that you could, you did. Also fishing. Every good modern RPG game nowadays has fishing. It's like an industry standard at this point. With Kakarot embracing the future, I feel like we still can't forget about the past. Ask any Dragon Ball Z fan who grew up in the 2000s, and they'll probably have a story about these games. Whether it was struggling with the grind to finally beat Frieza or Vegeta in those stupid dinosaur eggs, this trilogy left a mark. It's a reminder that even imperfect games can create a lasting memory. So here's a wild idea. What if the Legacy of Goku trilogy got a modern remake, like, with 2.5D graphics? So we could get the OG feel of the game, but with modern textures and improved pixel art. And no wolves. For the love of Jesus, no wolves. Or Egg Quest. I didn't really harp on the Egg Quest, but those were the bane of my existence in the second game. So we just leave all those in the past. And given the success of Kakarot, it doesn't seem too far-fetched. Legacy of Goku Super or Legacy of Goku Daima has a nice ring to it, but maybe not Legacy of Goku GT. Let's just ignore that one. So in conclusion, what is the legacy of the Goku games? And to be completely honest, I'm not 100% sure, but I will say this. They're a testament to scrappy development, relentless ambition, and the power of nostalgia. They weren't perfect, but they laid the groundwork for something greater. And now, thanks to Dragon Ball Z Kakarot, we can see how far the series has come, from Squirrels to Super Saiyan 3. It's been such an incredible ride. So that's it for today's franchise retrospective. If you like this trip down memory lane, drop a comment below. What's your favorite moment from the Legacy of Goku trilogy, or what do you hate most about it? If you somehow couldn't tell, it is 1000% the wolves. They are my actual ops. I don't know how that happened, but that's how it played out. And hey, if you've never actually played these games, do yourself a favor and check them out. Just watch out for the wolves. So thank you for watching. Like and subscribe and all the other fun stuff, and I will see you in the next one. You guys take it easy. All right, later.